Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hubbing the Cloud and the Future of TV Station Group Operations. We are very pleased to have veteran technology writer Glenn Dixon here to moderate today's webinar. Glenn, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Alyssa. Good afternoon. Welcome to How Will Hubbing in the Cloud Affect the Future of TV Station Group Operations? I'm Glenn Dixon, contributing editor for Broadcasting Cable. Oh, there's a Freudian slip. That shows how veteran I am for TVNewsCheck, contributing editor for TVNewsCheck. Hubbing, or streamlining operations for a station group by consolidating master control in centralized or regionalized technical centers, is nothing new. The first central casting efforts, as hubbing was formally described, were pioneered almost 20 years ago by now defunct groups like Ackerley, Lynn Television, and Clear Channel. And I covered them at something else that's defunct. But hubbing's methodology has changed with improvements in connectivity and automation software, alongside a wave of consolidation among station groups. With the rise of public and private cloud platforms as a complementary or even alternative technology, and the rollout of next-gen TV underway, the role of traditional master control hubbing is uncertain. Today, we'll explore the future of hubbing and television broadcast operations with a panel of experts. Joining me are Dave Burke, SVP and CTO of Gray Television, Kurt Rao, SVP and CTO of Tegna, Ray Thurber, VP Engineering at the EW Scripps Company, Stefan Havel, VP Engineering at Hearst Television, and Sam Peterson, GM of the Core Business Unit for Bit Central. For the audience, we'd like to make this experience as interactive as possible. There are some poll questions that will be popping up on your screen that we'd like you to all weigh in on. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions of our panelists, which we'll address towards the end. And if you're having any technical issues, please use the chat function to reach out to TVNewsCheck producer Alyssa Wesley, who's helping manage the event. Let's start with Ray. Can you describe your group's experience with master control hubbing to date and how your approach has evolved due to acquisitions over the years?
Sure. And you mentioned the word acquisition, and for us, that's kind of how we got into the master control hubbing business. There was an acquisition for McGraw-Hill for our Indy hub. Then the Tribune acquisition lent ourselves to gain Norfolk as a hub. And then most recently, the Ion purchase, and now we have a Clearwater hub. We love our hubs, and we've grown from traditional master control services to command and control. That's kind of traditional, but also content delivery or metadata delivery for syndicated content. We look to our hubs for innovation. They work with disaster recovery. So we do rehearsals with our Gulf Coast stations and really make sure that we can reach out and help a station when they need it the most. So acquisition got us there. We're extremely happy to have them and the people in them, Glenn.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we'll look a little more detail on how you use them a little later on in the conversation. Stefan, how much hubbing does Hearst do today, and what are your future plans?
So, we've been hubbing a number of our operations for over a decade now. To your point, it's not new. I think all of us here have dabbled in it in different ways, but the goal was to just take operations that we know broadcasters need and centralize them, or centrally distribute things that can be done that way more cost effectively, right? So traffic operations, we've hubbed down into the Charlotte market, acquisition, distribution, metadata, prepping data for media content. That's all being done out of a hub down in Orlando. We have mini hubs that we've created that actually help offset that workload. So certain programs are prepped in different markets at different times of the day for our stations as well. We've centralized our graphics hubs. We've moved that down into Orlando as well. So all of our graphics are created at a central location for all of our stations across the country. And then we have two regional master control hubs today. In the Midwest, we have 8 of our ABC affiliates that are hubbed at particular targeted day parts, as well as we have some southeast NBC stations that are hubbed. There's about 10 that are hubbed out of North Carolina. And again, they're targeted times of day. They're not 24 hours. As we spoke, prior to this webinar with the prep, we have mostly news organizations, right? We don't have mostly programming stations. So for us, the news organization is what drives the ability for our master control operators and our staffs to be in the facilities we have. So we've moved out everything we possibly could or can today, but we know we can do more, but not affecting the day-to-day operations of a news station and a news organization. So that's where we are today. We're looking obviously towards the future and what the cloud and all that can provide us to do more. We do a lot even within our news organizations, which we kind of call our own kind of a hub, in the sense that we're distributed, right? So it's a distributed hub formula for us, in that even our news content can be shared across all of our stations with the use of the technology that's out there today. So we're taking
and I do note from covering you guys for a while, you're one of the groups that actually has dedicated satellite capacity, for news, which is not typical. And we'll talk a little more about some of those future possibilities a little further on. Kurt, you've taken a different approach at Tegna. Instead of regional hubs, you're building a big centralized hub there in Charlotte. Can you describe the methodology behind that and how it's working out so far?
Yeah, so Glenn, thank you for the opportunity here. And I think similar to Stefan, I think Tegna has had a long history with, whether you want to call them hubs, shared service centers. And so we've done this with graphics and traffic and, other functions. And, about 3 years ago, when we looked at kind of sort of the state of technology across all of our stations, and as Ray said, most of us, I think, that come together because of acquisitions. So we saw an opportunity to really figure out, how do you standardize the process, the people side of the house, and the tech as part of the next generation of investment, right? And so we landed, after looking through, we did a lot of diligence. We looked at what our competitors were doing, and then we came to we came up with an architecture that lets us build this centralized facility in Charlotte, but by using technology such as cloud. We use private, a combination of private, primarily private, but we have some elements of public cloud in there. We can, in essence, if there was a disaster, our operators can work at a home and continue to control the master control function, right? And so architecturally, we've designed it in such a way that we'll support about 240 streams. We're about halfway through that migration process. And with anything new, you got to work out the kinks. But as we've been going through that process, we've been streamlining it. We actually had an internal report out yesterday. I'm happy to say, we're hitting service levels, exceeding service levels in some cases. But a lot of it is really, is focused on streamlining the process and ensuring the communication between the stations and the hub, which we call the Tegna Streaming Center, right, is as crisp as can be. And then setting expectations, because people, we will make mistakes. There will be software and hardware errors, but it is how you recover from that. But we've been very pleased so far with the progress we're making.
Okay, thanks. Dave, what has been Gray's past experience with hubbing, and how are you handling your master control functions today?
Well, I think we're probably the oddball in this group, although a lot of what Stefan and Ray and Kurt said applies to us too. I think we achieve, theoretically the same kind of workflow synergies and cost efficiencies, but our approach is slightly different. We take master control, traditional master control operations, and production control. We've merged two positions there. So we automate news, and then we take the tech director position and the master control operator position, and we merge that into a single position called technical media producer, TMP. And that person does all the traditional master control, or most of the traditional master control duties, as well as what a tech director might do in production control. And so we get kind of the same synergies, except everything is self-contained at the TV station. News is, I think Stefan said this as well, or Ray, that news is kind of what drives the TV station. And so, we're in news 5-6 hours a day at our traditional big three affiliates, and you got network the other 10 or 12 hours of the day. So you're in the control room the bulk of the day, and having that operator there who can do both mass control and production control, we have found for us, and dates back probably 8 to 10 years now within the Gray Television affiliates, that model works well for us.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and we'll talk a little more about some of the capabilities that gives you. Sam, what has been Bit Central's experience with hubbing among its customers? And can you talk about a couple use cases? I think most people are probably familiar with you guys from a news production standpoint, but talk a little bit about your master control customers.
Sure, absolutely. So a couple of customer environments come to mind that are completely different in the way that they've approached centralized operations. One is exactly that, a centralized personnel and hardware implementation where they're running essentially a private hub and operating all of their station group out of a single site, which was an interesting project to bring up on our product for master control. And really kind of leveraging, and you kind of heard this, is trying to gain as many efficiencies they could in this particular case on the ingest side as much as on the playout side. A lot of common content, across all of those streams that they're producing, over 50 unique station outputs that are out of this one centralized operation. And then we'll have another very large customer who's doing it kind of the opposite way, where the hardware is decentralized, so out at the edge, much closer to the STL, but the operators are somewhat commingled but remote. So a remote control operation. And I think for us as a manufacturer, and I think this kind of as industry, being able to be flexible in the way that we put together systems to meet individual challenges, because everybody has a little bit different spin on what they need. I mean, you've heard, 4, kind of differing approaches, which I think is what's necessary. Everybody has a little bit different need, but it's been interesting to be able to put together a set of technology, a set of products, work with other third parties to make sure that we can, rise to the challenge. And I think the big thing that you hear also is, quality can't suffer from this. Kurt talked about quality of services. In putting these services together, we can't let quality suffer. We still need to put out a high quality output. And actually what we've seen in a couple of these cases is it's actually as high, if not higher, because we're really able to focus on that function in a little bit different way and show how important it is.
And, following up on those customer cases, the customer that has more of a distributed workflow where they're controlling stuff that's at various sites. Why did they take that approach versus the more centralized model?
Well, some of that we kind of referred to this a little bit in the pre-call. For them, it was connectivity. There were some real challenges with connectivity to the transmission locations. And so literally the hardware, the high bandwidth links needed to be close to the transmitter. But the remote control, we were able to mitigate some of those, the bandwidth requirements, latency requirements, and in their operation, that's just the style that worked better just because of the limitations of the actual sites that they needed to transmit from.
Okay, thanks. Going back to our broadcasters, going back to, I'll start with Ray. How much of a consideration is staffing when it comes to hubbing, including training? And is some of this an effort to, centralize expertise and leverage it across multiple stations as technology lets you do that?
Yeah, I think Kurt mentioned customer service, and that's part of our training. We can all reach for technology off the shelf that we can find something that'll work for our stations. I think the magic is the people inside of our hubs and at our local station who kind of are hooked up with that servant's heart, which will reach out, proactively help a station. So that's what we really try to drive home inside of our hubs, is that connectivity to the local station with customer service, and certainly train to it. So both at the media prep, and we're a little bit like Dave too, where we want those people to have several talents, work in production for news and then work in media prep, but also at our hubs. Training, customer service is paramount.
Okay, thanks. Stefan, what do you think of staffing as part of this, and have you had to do some training at the places where you've set up those night watch sites?
So for us, training is always, and everyone on this call probably can attest to, finding the folks that you can train is the difficult part, right? Our industry with regards to drawing new talent in is tough, right? And when they get here, you either love it or you hate it, kind of a scenario. So once you get them, you want to keep them and train them up. In our two regional hubs for master control, the nice thing about it, we put them in locations where the people knew what to do, right? I mean, this was a day-to-day operation for them. Now they've just taken on the responsibility for some additional things, right? So similar to what everybody says here, we love the cross-training, the cross-utilization of folks in some of our markets. Absolutely right. Master control operator, when news time comes, steps up, walks into production control. He's rolling the brakes, he's switching the show, and he's doing everything that needs to be done, he or she. So and that's the nuance of all of this, is really finding the right staff, hanging on to that staff, and attracting new staff. And when you get those folks into a location, training, keeping them trained, and starting in a facility like we've done with these two, again, the knowledge base was there. So there's a lot of things that we can do there as we grow the staff to do more than the targeted day parts, or do more for the group across all the stations on a more expanded basis. You have the tenured staff that can help groom that new group of folks that are going to have to take that on.
Okay, thanks. Dave, can you talk a little bit about the training for this TMP position that you've created, and sort of describe the overall trajectory for those folks in your company?
Sure. And I think Stefan made some really good points there about the agility of, you want an operator who's at the station who, if you're in master control and now you go over to production control because you're in news. And we think the TMP model lends itself very well to that. And to echo what Sam said, if you go back to when TMP was born, Gray's heritage is kind of a small market company to start with. And in the small markets, you have individuals who are doing many tasks, many functions. And that kind of led to the idea of, hey, let's combine master control operator with a tech director. So you end up with one of those two guys on steroids, so to speak. And so the training is very key. How do you get a tech director to learn the master control duties, or a master control operator to learn what tech director? They're somewhat different disciplines. So training is very key. We have a very well documented program. We go on site. There's a long conversion process and timeline. And before we go live, there's rehearsals and all that stuff. So training is absolutely key in the TMP world.
Okay, and most of these folks are relatively new in their broadcast careers compared to like chief engineers, for example, in terms of the age group.
Well, I know there's some chief engineers out there listening to this probably, but I'm trying to think. My knee-jerk answer is most people are probably younger than the chief engineers out there. But so I don't know if I would say these guys are newbies. You've got people that for whatever reason in this industry, once people get in, especially on the technical side, it's just so attractive. Every day is different. There's a new challenge that comes about every day. You got a schedule. And so people love that kind of work environment. So I'm not, convinced that everybody that we start with in TMP is what I would consider a new employee. So okay. Tech directors, and back to Ray's point about acquisitions, we acquire a station. If we go in and we're going to convert them to TMP, it's a long 6 to 8 to 9 month process. And so tech directors at a TV station typically have been there a while.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Kurt, how much of a factor do you see the local talent pool, local pay scale, and union presence when you're picking a hub location? What made Charlotte attractive? And when you just look across the industry, maybe just give some comment on sourcing talent. That's something several folks have mentioned.
So when we went down our process, Glenn, I think there were a bunch of criteria, right? It was about, what's the availability of connectivity? How do you get there from a transportation, right? We wanted direct flights from, DC or New York, right? What's the talent pool in the marketplace, right? What's the labor cost in the marketplace? right? Those were the things that we were looking at. We didn't really consider whether it be a union or a non-union market, right? And ultimately, we looked at places that would be kind of sort of standalone facilities. But ultimately, we had an opportunity in our Charlotte area where there was space that could be repurposed for a hub. And, we had a team, and I'm very proud that our team was able to, identify it, take advantage of it, and really build something out of, what was in essence a garage and a storage shed, right? So ultimately, I think those are the kinds of things, most of us are looking for. And by building it and within the station, as an example for us, we reduce some of the costs of just having that as an independent facility.
Right. Thanks.
Right.
Yeah.
And just one thing on the people side of this, and I think Ray said, the tech is easy to get, and you'll eventually there'll be bugs and things, you'll get that working. The one thing that we as a team focus on, what I call emotional quotient, right? So when somebody is not physically in the building, right, and is sitting in Charlotte, how does that person understand what's the culture of the station that they're supporting? Right, and what's that dynamic? And they're 9 out of 10 times they probably have never been to that station, and so that's to me that part of the training is so much more important, because you'll get the technical side, I think, relatively quickly, and people will make some mistakes there, but it's really understanding the culture of the organization that they're supporting that makes it that much more important in terms of customer service.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Ray, it sounds like your hubs were were selected a little bit of by serendipity in terms of where acquisitions and such. But overall, how much of a factor is local talent pool and local pay, union, et cetera, when you're looking maintaining a hub operation there versus moving it?
Yeah, again, and you mentioned it, we didn't pick them, they kind of picked us, and we're glad through acquisition that happened. It is, and I'll go back to what Kirk said and what we talked about before, it's all about culture. So we look at that first and foremost, and do we have people that can kind of have that Scripps culture, help people give great customer service? And as a bonus, do they lean in when you tell them a crazy idea? And we have that with our hubs, and that's what we look for first and foremost, Glenn. Okay,
thanks. Question for Stefan. Did you consider outsourcing at all for your what you're doing in master control hubbing today and what you might be looking to do down the road?
So yeah, I mean, obviously prior to me taking on this role, years back, we've gone through the same kind of analysis on, what does the numbers look like? Does it make sense? How does it impact, the day-to-day operations, especially the way it impacts news, which is our primary business. So they've done the analysis back then. We dusted them off. We looked at them again because obviously times have changed. And at the time, we felt the same way, right? What Ray and Kurt are saying, the culture of what you're building has to fit the overall culture of what Hearst Television is too, right? So taking that in-house, you kind of get to control some of that, right? You're utilizing those people that are used to that culture. So as you expand, you're infusing that same culture to the new group of folks. So that was part of the reason, and that's the reason we started with the ABCs in the Midwest to kind of get a sense of, okay, what would that look like? How do we do it? And then we started, with the NBCs down in the Southeast. Again, changing the model a little bit, understanding a little bit more, but we continue to look, right? We continue to look at the outsourcing solutions that are out there. Again, with cloud now being the new thing, right? We want to make sure is what we're going to do moving forward able to take advantage of what perhaps the cloud can provide us, right? For our .2s and all of our programming streams, it's probably a simple solution at some point. But again, the impact of removing these things from this local station inside the local communities that our news departments, serve, that's our primary goal. So whatever we do, we keep in mind that we cannot change the impact or the effects to that type of operation that we've taken years to grow in that market. So the same thing, the customer service. So even if it's not in the station, you pick something up and you make a call to get something resolved, it should feel like they're right next door, right? So that's what we're hoping to build and move towards. And again, the cloud is going to offer some solutions that should not impact what we do day to day. And that's what we need. So the throughput, the connectivity, it has to feel like you're there, right? And those folks that are grinding it out day to day to provide our communities and viewers our news and programming, they need to feel like there's no real change in operations for them. So that's key to us. And again, I think these outsourced hub companies are looking for different ways to do this. For us, we're thinking, is it more of a distributive kind of hub, right? Sort of like what we're doing already. And we started down the road with the ABCs and the NBCs to kind of distribute the responsibility and also provide the DR capability. This pandemic has opened our eyes to all the remote operations we have to do. Not only do we may need to remote operate master control, but we may not have bodies in a building that can operate the equipment to do a newscast, right? And how do I somehow within a region be able to do a newscast for a facility that, unfortunately maybe got hit with an outbreak of COVID, right? So those are all things that I'm sure Ray, Dave, Kurt, we're all thinking about is what does that future look like? And how do we quickly spin things up, where the cloud can come in and maybe provide some solutions for us. So yeah, we're learning and we continue to learn. And to Dave's point, that's our business, right? It's ever changing. You never know what the day is going to bring as a broadcaster. And it goes back to the comment, you either love it or you hate it, because it can be frustrating at times.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. Dave, you mentioned it doesn't sound like a trivial thing to bring somebody up to speed to be a TMP and do these multiple functions. Was outsourcing of master control, was that something that Gray had looked at?
I would say we're always looking, and try not to repeat a lot what Stefan said. I think I kind of maybe put it in 3 buckets. The linear signal that's generated at the TV station, the master control there. Maybe we step our way into it with, he mentioned DR or even multicast DigiNet pass-through type channels that might make sense to come from the cloud and come down to the TV station. I think, all of us have extensive digital platforms now. I think those make a lot of sense to move into the cloud. And then I think most of us also have, some sort of nationwide network type cable type channels. And those, to me, because they're outside of your group, you're distributing them outside your group, those also kind of lend themselves to maybe be cloud friendly or outsourced providers. So, but from the traditional broadcast master control primary signal right now, I like our model. I like our TMP model. It's a career path for a TMP to get further into the news hierarchy. So I think we're pretty happy with that model.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna take. We have a couple questions from the audience, and I'll ask one now. I think it's pertinent to the first part of the conversation. Anonymous attendee, is there a magic number of streams that hubbing makes sense? And I'll add a follow up to that also for folks who have sort of regional hubs. What's kind of the sweet spot for how many stations that hub is handling master control for? But yeah, I guess, Ray, let you take a first stab at that.
And so it's how many streams or stations we would handle in a given hub, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, is there a magic number where it makes financial sense? I guess, and if it's one stream, it doesn't make sense. If you're a one station group, you're your own hub and that's it. But yeah, when you look.
With our scale right now, I mean, the hubs kind of limited by the buildings, right? Which has changed a lot during COVID. So I think it can certainly increase, Glenn, because many of our hub operators in the Indie Hub are actually doing their work from the dining room table, where they watch a multitude of stations as, their shift. So I think that's rapidly changing. But before, because we were a big enough group, we were hubbed. It was more limited by the building. Then we got Norfolk and we could expand.
And how many stations thereabouts does each one of those hubs handle?
I will bet you, as far as streams, Indy was way, well over 50 or 60. So maybe they have the bulk of our television stations, so considerably over 30, nearing 40, and Norfolk probably has much of the former Tribune, another 10 or so. Rough numbers, but around
Okay.
there.
Okay.
And at the
Stephanie.
same time, Glenn, they're also handling all of our Scripps networks. We're a multicast company, so those are
Right.
all inside of our hubs too.
Okay. And Steph, in your hubs, about how many streams are they handling, each one of them, or
Yes.
more simple stations? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the numbers I gave you were call letters, right? And there's 10 and there's 8 in the two hubs that we have today. The streams, each one is at least the main channel and a .2 or 2, right? So 8 times 3, those are the stations count, if you will. So you multiply that by 10, right? 10 times 3 is 30, and then you got 10 times 3 times 8, say roughly that's your 24. Now we're expanding multicasts. I think everybody has seen that there's been a big draw to more multicast carriage for over the air. So stream wise, that's just going to go up. What we really try to focus on, and that's the reason we kept the NBCs together, the ABCs together, is what is all similar, right? Some of this is all the same. It's the same MeTV.2, it's the same, Australia.3 or whatever, and it's your main channel, which is the ABC network, to make it easier for the operator. And that's what we're trying to groom and figure out, because today it's one operator at those targeted times. And again, we pick the targeted times because it's the low-hanging fruit, it's the overnight, it's a network, time of day and things like that, where it makes it easy to kind of learn, right? And that's really what we're doing, is we're learning, okay, how far out we can go, because then you got to start thinking about, you got to staff up these hubs, right? If you get to the point where you start bringing more and more in, you can't have only one individual, two individuals being responsible for everything. Especially, again, breaking news happens, as we all know, when it's least expected, and you got to have the staff to be able to hand that back to the local station and let them take control, or at least help them navigate to get there, right? So you want to make sure we keep an eye on the store, and really we're trying to figure out, okay, what's that final sweet spot of the number of channels or streams today that you're going to end up with.
Thanks. Kurt, it seems like you guys have decided that, no matter the number of streams, a centralized facility makes sense for Tegna, but, just ballpark, how many streams are you talking about, eventually coming out of Charlotte on the linear broadcast side? And maybe, you could talk a little bit about how that relates to your OTT operation as well. I noticed it was called the Streaming Center. It wasn't called the Master Control Center. So I got to ask you about it.
Yeah, so today, we are planning and assuming that there will be an excess of 240 streams coming out of there. It's a similar math, right? One primary plus three to four sub channels. Right now, one of the things we've done is we work with for example, we work with NewsOn, and we're able to take the content coming out of the stream center, pipe it through our dynamic ad insertion engines, right, and then pump it directly to the likes of NewsOn or YouTube or whatever the distribution mechanism is, right? So that, over time, I think we'll bring more and more of that capability. Our current focus is really on moving things out of the stations and into the Charlotte center. And we have a roadmap over the next 12 months to complete it. But then, we will start pulling off those other things in over time.
Okay, thanks. Sam, we've been talking about master control consolidation, but, can you talk a little about what you're seeing in other parts of your station group customers? Are people newly centralizing graphics? A couple of folks mentioned they already had graphics hubs, but are you seeing more centralization in other production functions?
We see a lot of that, particularly remote operation, obviously, as necessary, with COVID, and, being able to remotely contribute, both content from a finished content and source content. And, one of the big things that we were not necessarily surprised about but something that a lot of our customers have used a fair amount in our product Oasis is sharing content between sites. And seeing that really increase in this kind of collaboration between call letters within a station group. And that really, that we've been seeing that a fair amount even before COVID, but those numbers doubled and then almost tripled, very, very quickly as they were becoming more accustomed to, using a tool that they might have used occasionally previously, but were using it every day.
Okay, thanks. A follow-up along this about hubbing more stuff. Actually, a question from the audience, like another question from the audience. Another anonymous attendee, and we do encourage you guys to identify yourselves so these people can have, if they have a bone to pick with you, they can find you. Anyway, it says, anonymous attendee, there's some great discussion beginning about how acquisitions have brought some of these companies into the role of hubbing. Gray recently acquired Meredith that has unique hub operations outside, I guess, from Master Control, particularly creative services and real graphics operation. Could Dave speak of how Gray could integrate or bring these new hubs into the fold? And, I don't know if you want to answer that specifically or just talk generally about other things that Gray is doing with hubbing.
Well, that's quite a very specific question.
It is, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and from an anonymous attendee. So first of all, we have announced the acquisition or the intention to acquire Meredith. It hasn't closed yet, of course, and it won't close probably till the end of the year. There's various types of hubs, and Meredith has a centralized master control hub in Atlanta. I have great respect for Tom Casey and before him, Larry Oakes and Meredith as a company. I know that they went through the same diligence, and we've talked about this throughout. There's various ways, even among the centralized master controls between narrowband and wideband. Do you send the 19.4 down, or do you just send the SDI streams down? There's so many different ways to hub. And I think the common theme across all of us is that we came up with an analysis that says, here's some synergies, here's some workflow integrations, here's efficiencies. And we all, for the most part, probably realized the same end of the day type savings. And I feel quite confident that Meredith's centralized master control operations have gone through similar analysis and similar results. And I wouldn't see any reason to really change that. In fact, I could see us piggybacking on what they have in place, particularly with parts of master control that we have not hubbed. We talked about content prep and things like that. I think it'd be great to have the opportunity to tap into those resources that Meredith has. So really, really, really look forward to working with the Meredith stations and the Meredith hubs on that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, if there is a common theme here, it seems to be that through acquisitions, if you have something that's working already, that's hubbed, exactly, you don't mess with it. Right. Interesting. So, my next question was going to be about cloud, and we have a couple audience questions about the cloud. I'll share results of the polls. I guess our first poll question was just about how many people had hubbed, and that percentage was over 70% at hub. Maybe it's just we have a very hubbing focused audience, but the cloud question was interesting. The question about, do you use the public cloud for any master control functions today? Yes was only 16%, no was 84%. But then we asked no, if no, do you think your company will be running some master control workflows in public cloud in the next 5 years? And that was 75% respondents said yes. So, I guess the question for you guys, how much of do you have any hub operations in the cloud today? I know you referenced DR, several of you. Do you have any of that in the public cloud today? And what do you see as the role of that going forward? And I guess I would add also a follow-up. You can talk about your life cycle, your current on-premise hardware, maybe how that colors your thinking on that. Tackle that first. I guess I'll throw it to Ray first, since he hasn't talked in a while. Sure.
Yeah, it was actually the best part of the show. So we definitely have cloud-based systems for disaster recovery. If there's hurricanes moving through Florida, we want to be able to aid a station. We've also, not right in master control, but adjacent to it, we have virtual control rooms that we stood up for COVID in case we had a building that had quarantines or other issues. We've never had to use that, fortunately, but I would call that kind of a private cloud-based system. We are definitely looking at it, love having content in two places. IT security, big topic of conversation, clearly. So we will look to that cloud, either private or public. So Glenn, if the question is in the next 5 years, will we move to it? We are using it in targeted ways right now, mostly for disaster recovery. And we think that grows in the coming months and years for sure.
Okay. Dave, are you guys doing anything in the cloud right now for master
No,
control?
right, and I would just echo exactly what Ray just said. I mean, 100%. And we've all seen this, consolidation of the whole broadcast industry. Technology platforms are all moving to general purpose hardware, IP, IT type backbones and infrastructure. So now moving them from the tech core of a TV station to the cloud, private cloud, public cloud, managed cloud. I think those all become a lot more feasible. Connectivity costs have become, have dropped significantly, ubiquitous now in small markets. It's one of the reasons why we might not have done hubbing, was because it's so hard to get connectivity to some of the locations that in small markets. And to me, hubbing, you kind of want to have connectivity to not only the studio, but also the transmitter site. And finding connectivity to the transmitter site on IP can be a little difficult still today, but really so in small markets. So all that to me is accelerating at a fast pace. And yeah, I absolutely agree with the sentiment that we're always looking to put things in the cloud. It makes you very flexible and agile and especially in DR situations. So yeah, I agree with the not only the poll audience answers, but exactly what Ray said.
Okay, thanks. Oh, well, and Stefan, you talk about having interest in the cloud. I guess what is it the fact that you're not doing more today, is that a function of it not being ready for real 24/7 broadcast operations, or is it just a function of your equipment life cycle, that you have stuff that is still working today and it hasn't been fully depreciated and it doesn't make financial sense?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, right? I mean, and I echo everything Ray and Dave said, because the connectivity is the key, right? I mean, and having that redundancy, diverse path, and all that's going to play into us as broadcasters. We like redundancy, we like backups, right? We got to have a fail to, right? The cloud can provide that as long as you have the good end connectivity that you need, right? So today what we do, and everybody on this call and everybody probably listening in, right, we have a lot of functions that we do locally, right? With when we prep stuff, how we transcode things, how we do all the work we do it all today. And it's all computer based. It's all done at a location, which is our cloud in essence, right? All those functions can be moved to the cloud, right? A lot of that can be done. The egress and ingress, all that has to be factored into this. But everything we do today, process wise, at these hub locations can be done. I can sit in a room full of people and work on things and that not be nowhere in the building, right? So that's capable, right? Again, the connectivity, the redundancy, and the reliability has got to play into that, and it has to feel like it's there, right, for everything that we do. So we don't do a lot of it today, but we have all those systems that we know that we can move up there. To your point and question about life cycle, ideally you would say, okay, when this piece of equipment needs to be replaced, we'll be ready to move to the cloud. Now, if those come together, that would be a great thing, right? But we do things in cycles as well, right? So it might be, as we cycle through equipment and hardware over all of our station groups, it takes maybe 2 to 3 years. With IT, we try to do it quickly because the technology changes from year to year to keep everybody on the same type of a platform. But that's going to be the goal, right? Is when we get ready to do the next technology refresh on a piece of equipment or hardware that we're hosting, that's the time to move it to the cloud if the cloud can support it. So that's what we're watching. That's what we're doing. So that 5-year timeline that you saw most people thinking, that's probably right, pretty accurate to start seeing a lot more of this stuff moving to the cloud for broadcasters, I think.
Okay, thanks. And Sam, what are you seeing from your customers and their use of the cloud today, and they're thinking about it? And you talk about not just master control, but you can talk about news applications as well.
Yeah, and I think for both, I mean, one of the things that we've seen actually for a long time, and I won't point out specifically who on the call, but a couple of people on the call are using those services from Central today as far as file delivery, file distribution, and content replication services. And those are things that we've deployed in the cloud and or private data center for some time. And so those file-based asynchronous kind of transfer things where it's not a real-time stream, that's been easy to do, maybe a little bit more less vulnerable to what that last mile connection looks like. And so we have many customers who are actually using those services. And then as far as cloud master control, I'd say the one trend that we've seen, DR is certainly one. And then the second is, we haven't necessarily used this term, but the term that we use internally is these non-persistent services, or things like .2s and .3s. You kind of heard that a little bit before. We have a customer today who's running a .2 service with a cloud component from us today, and are looking to deploy others. And that's why we continue to look at how do we accelerate, how do we make sure that you've heard it, building things on COTS infrastructure, then it's pretty easy to migrate, being software focused. But already, particularly those file services, content replication, DR, those are the types of applications that customers are already migrating and deploying with us.
Okay, thanks. A couple, I'll take a couple more questions from the audience here. Well, this is a good one. Going back to some of the stuff we talked about in regards to talent, from Dave Stark. How do you recruit and develop the next generation of master control operators? And how do we, I guess as an industry, maintain competitive salaries for these roles? I guess I'll run that by Kurt and make sure he's still here. And then let everyone else take a stab at that.
Yeah, well, we will, we've been on a hiring path in Charlotte, right? I think when we're all done, we'll have close to 90 people in that facility. The vast majority of that pyramid is, our operators, right? Master control operators. And what we've been doing is, I think we referenced this earlier, you're certainly finding people in the industry that, are willing to look or willing to change roles. And then, we have this concept, we're going to have to grow trees, right? You're going to have to hire people out of college, or, at least, and there are a bunch of organizations that we're working with that are starting to encourage, I'm going to call the younger people and kids to go into this kind of space. But ultimately, I think a lot of this is, what we talked about in terms of training is, it's on the job, right? Is bringing them in, providing an opportunity, whether that's internships or other types of things. But ultimately, I think, this is it's certainly a need. And it's there is a growing, what I'll call a growing deficit that, we all have to figure out how to get people in this space. Okay,
thanks. Yeah, and thanks, by the way, for that was another question that someone had about what kind of staff size. Obviously, you guys are running a very large centralized hub, but go to Ray. I mean, how many people are what kind of staff do you have doing the master control functions at these hubs? And then maybe opine on the question about how you might hire the future versions of those people and attract them. But yeah, how many folks are we talking about at these hub facilities?
Yeah, over 40 at our Indy Hub facility, which I think from when I first started doing this job, so go back to 2014, I think maybe we were at 14 or 16. And then a little bit over 20 at Norfolk. So, when I think about acquiring new talent, the first thing I think about is retaining the current ones. And we try to keep our turnover rate really low, and do that hopefully by really connecting with our employees, getting them excited, giving them opportunities. I think at the local station level, Glenn, that what's been described as kind of that media prep job that also provides a career path to go into news, into production, is also very good. When we put out the help wanted sign at one of our hubs, we look for the curious, and we like to look in different places, maybe hire from outside the industry and train and then retain. But we look for those people that first and foremost will connect with our culture, be that customer service environment, because we can teach them the rest.
Okay, thanks. Another question for Dave. This is another particular question, but I think it's relatively harmless. Was asking about, do you see the need for a technical media producer to get familiar with data science workflows to assist in analytics or any machine learning task the station may need to do? And that comes from Michael Kaplan.
Well, I'm not quite certain what he's referring to. Just from the interpretation I get it, if he's talking about machine learning and artificial intelligence and things like that, I don't actually think that's unique to just TMP. I think that's something that all of us are challenged with, trying to figure out how to get metadata and artificial intelligence and things like that to make, more automated type decisions at the TV station. So I don't see that as unique to TMP. So I may be missing the connection here on the question.
Okay.
But I do think that that's another one of these things that's evolving in our industry.
Okay, thanks. Let's about 10 minutes left, and I do want to talk about, we sort of mentioned it offhand, but we have next gen TV being rolled out by a number of the groups represented here on this call. And does rolling out next gen TV, ATSC 3.0 is still how I kind of think of it. Is that rolling out on a meaningful basis? Does that require a new master control infrastructure? When it comes to delivering some of the new applications that are being talked about, like targeted advertising, does it make more sense to do that in the cloud than on premise? So I guess I'll run that question by Stefan first, and then pass it around.
Yeah, I mean, we're participating. We've launched in a number of markets ourselves. We're 3.0 in 3 of our markets, and we're hosting in a number of the other markets as a 1.0 host. I mean, the lift to do 3.0 is an encoder, right? And it's not a heavy lift to get into that space to start learning. And that's where we are. We're in the start to learn process. We're running apps. We're doing a lot with it. We're exploring a lot of things. Partnerships with back channels, companies are going to be key in some of this, right? We have the technology that's looking for a business model, in my opinion, right? We got to figure out, what do we do with this all now, right? So we're putting it up there, right? It's the chicken before the egg. We got to get it out there. We got to start playing with it. We got to start seeing what we can and can't do. But as far as master control today, it's a very light lift. The impact isn't great at all. But the cloud, with the direct to consumer advertising and things like that, once we have that business model, absolutely probably play into it, right? Where do we serve those up from and things like that? So again, we're early into this. This has been a big push this year during all everything that was going on. I'm surprised we did as much as we did with the launch of 3.0 in this. But so yeah, we're still learning. But I agree that the cloud's going to play part of that.
Follow up on that, when you we talked about targeted advertising. When you look at the traffic systems that stations have today, and a lot of traffics and sales systems have been well entrenched for years. Is that stuff capable of supporting? Is that software capable of supporting those kind of targeted workflows, or is that going to come from the OTT side of your house?
Yeah, Hearst is good in the sense that we got the OTT side, we got the ad op side. They're all working and collaborating to figure that out, because today you're absolutely right. What that looks like, what do the systems today actually support that? The answer is probably not yet. They're all trying to figure it out as well. So luckily I don't deal with the ad op side of this as much, because that's a whole nother headache. So we'll let them figure that out. But the traffic systems have to evolve. To your point that you made earlier, right? That's always been one of the things, that are these things doing the things they should be doing for us, right? As a whole, and they're still working through that. So I think it's probably great timing, because they need to improve what they've been doing, and now they have to add on and bolt on, this direct to consumer advertising, right?
Yeah.
So.
Thanks. Ray, Carraway Scripps has obviously been very involved in next gen, and you have the trial of automotive applications that you're, the test track in Detroit that you guys are helping support. What do you see from, if this rolls out meaningfully in a couple of years, does that require a refresh of what you're doing at your hubs?
I don't think so. And I'll say a meaningful rollout, and I'm going to build on what Stefan said. My goodness, in the middle of a pandemic, I think by the end of this year, we're going to have 68% of the country covered. That's pretty amazing. When folks said broadcasters couldn't cooperate to do 3.0, clearly we have. and during a pandemic, which no one ever saw. So I'm really thrilled with that. We really look at it like Stefan does in a way. Everything that we do on OTT, and all 41 of our news gathering markets have their own OTT channel. Everything we do there is triggered by master control. So it is a dress rehearsal for us just to move that technology and that knowledge over. As soon as 3.0 is ready for addressable advertising, we're ready too as broadcasters.
Okay, thanks. And Dave, you care to weigh in on this? You know, what you think next year?
Sure. I mean, without being repetitive, I think that 3.0, the more people learn about 3.0, the more they'll realize 3.0 is kind of viewed more as the OTT side of the business than it is on the linear stream side of the business. It'll act and behave and be treated. It to me is the perfect example right now of this crossover between traditional broadcast, linear platforms and applications, and how they're all converging and moving over to IT-based platforms. 3.0 has such a heavy IT component in it, from not only coding on web pages, but how it's delivered, how it's streamed, how it has a back channel, the broadband component to it. It is huge on the IT side, where right now in the SDI baseband linear world, you don't have to think too much about IT, but you definitely are going to have to on the 3.0 side. And Glenn, you said if 3.0 takes hold in the next 3 to 5 years. I think you meant to say when 3.0.
Well, there's you know, as Stefan referenced, there's a difference between coverage and revenues, I guess, you know, and that's you know, and when I hear people who are involved in the groups, and he's not the only one to say this, that, you know, there's still a search for a business model. You know, you can imagine what the skeptics outside of the broadcast industry are saying. But yeah, no, I've been, you know, I from covering this for a while, you know, I would echo Ray's sentiments. I'm surprised that the rollout has gone as well as it has, given particularly the early days of you know, folks rolling out some of these pilot stations. That was dovetailed basically with the worst time of COVID, and the fact that people were able to, you know, even get sticks up and running and do the work. And I know a lot of the technology work was done, the integration was done remotely, you know, and managed to make things happen. So yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree. Kurt, what do you know, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on what it takes for 3.0 and how you see, you know, the OTT systems that you've already developed, how you see leveraging those with master control operations for next gen TV.
Yeah, I think Ray touched on this. Our master control today is the input point for a lot of our OTT apps that are getting, you know, that are being distributed, right? So it is the same signal. With what we, you know, when I think of 3.0, right, it brings two experiences together. It brings the linear broadcast along with a digital experience, right? And you know what you're starting to see, and I'm learning this myself, is right. It's either it's a fast service or a VOD service, right? And ultimately, I think the goal is in this new 3.0 world is to provide a seamless interface to the consumer. So they don't need to know whether it's a video on demand or a live linear broadcast, right? But ultimately, what it does, as Dave said, is, you know, you get a lot of power on the back end to be able to monetize it differently, right? Be able to do hyper-local targeted advertising, hyper-local targeted content distribution, right? And the back channel, you know, that gives you data, allows you to build consumer insights, right? And so to me, there's a lot of power in there. And, you know, the thing I'll say, you know, is if we continue to be powerful or as powerful as we've been with our storytelling, right? What you see playing out in OTT with consumers, right? You could see that same kind of sort of translate over to next gen, right? So I am a little more bullish and optimistic that, you know, the business models have been figured out or closer to being figured out. And it's certainly there are prototypes that are working in adjacent industries that you could bring over.
Thanks. And we're nearing the end of our time. I have another follow-up, which is related to next gen a little bit. You know, besides the targeted advertising and maybe other applications in mobile, the other thing you can do is UHD, whether it's 4K or or 1080p HDR. And, there's a lot of broadcasters who say, well, we're going to need to do that to compete with streaming services. So this past couple of weeks, NBC's, that's really been the first, what they've been doing with the Olympic primetime show has been, sort of first broad distribution of 4K. Looking at it from you guys on the affiliate side, what do you see needing to do in master control if 4K becomes an everyday occurrence and the networks are all providing it? Do you have to replace a lot of your gear? I guess whoever wants to take a stab at that first.
Well, yeah, well, we're going to participate, and we're going to do whatever we need to do to keep it coming through our affiliates, right? And that's what we're doing today, right? Because we have obviously NBC affiliates, and we're passing through that UHD signal through our facility. We can upconvert to the 4K, our local, content into that. We always want to be a player in that. And really, you can build it as an island, small island, like we've done in the past with HDSD conversions and things like that. So you make that migration. It's not going to be a heavy lift to stay in that game eventually as things migrate. And if we're going to be generating our own 4K UHD stuff, news, who knows, at some point, or at least 1080p. But we'll play in that space. And really, if we needed to do it just like we did with NBC, it can be done. It can be done relatively quickly and easily.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else have any thoughts on supporting 4K on an every night basis?
We would agree with Stefan that, we have, I believe, 3 stations doing the Olympics right now. We think there's a place for broadcasters to do targeted shows. And we think this is important because it's not a mandate. I need to have my neighbor come over and see 4K content and a really good user experience. So they want 3.0 also in their home, because we need to move the consumer quickly.
Thanks. Well, we come to the end of our session. I do want to share the last poll result. It said, do you think it's likely broadcasters will have to once again remove personnel from facilities this fall, winter due to the COVID-19 situation getting worse? 78% said yes. I hope from my own perspective, living in a #1 DMA, that is wrong because of broader implications for people's lives. But it does sound like everyone has already managed through COVID using some of this hub technology, and it sounds like everyone is prepared for distributed workflows if they have to happen again. But let's hope that doesn't materialize. Let's hope our audience is wrong. Anyway, I would like to thank all my panelists for some great insights and really good interactive discussion. We've had a lot of audience interest, and I thank all your questions. You had some better ones than I could come up with. So I wish you all a good afternoon.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, everyone, for participating.